This is what a $25 million a year salary looks like versus a $25,000 a year salary. About 20% of Americans live on this amount of money or less. I want to show you the lifestyles of people who make this much money versus this much money, and everything in between. The reason I want to look at these differences is because of this graph. It's going up, which is a problem. Let's start with $25,000 a year.
Let's say my name is George. I live in Atlanta, Georgia. I am single and I have no kids. And I'm looking for a job. After some searching, I found this job as a security guard at a TV studio in downtown Atlanta. Let's assume I work 40 hours a week, and I work every week except 2 that I set aside for holidays, sickness, and vacation. At this level, around 29% of Americans earn as much or less than me. So how will I spend it? This comes out to be just over $2,000 a month that I have to spend. I gotta pay taxes. That brings me down to $1,764 to live on this month. To calculate this next part for this income and all of the incomes we're looking at, I used some data from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics that shows that people in this income bracket spend about 41% of their pre-tax income on housing. I've got about $850 for all my housing expenses. That's nearly half my after-tax budget. I'll definitely be renting instead of owning a house at this budget. A lot of landlords these days require you to earn 3 times more the monthly rent. So I'm probably gonna need roommates if I'm gonna get approved for an apartment. Let's look at Craigslist. I really can't afford to live downtown, so I'm gonna look in the outskirts. And I found this place right outside the city, and it's within my budget for rent and utilities. So how am I gonna get to my job, which is in downtown Atlanta? That's 20 minutes away from where I live. And like most American cities, there's not great public transportation here, so I'm gonna need to have a car. Let's just say in this assumption, and it's kind of a big assumption, that I already have a car. And let's assume it's this car. It's a 2004 Toyota Solara that I got on Facebook Marketplace. Lower income Americans spend more on their income for transportation than any other segment of the population. The data we'll use says about 15% of pre-tax income is spent on transportation. So that's $313 for gas, insurance, parking, and saving up for maintenance and repairs. We gotta be pretty careful about how much extra driving we do and hope that no big maintenance issues arise. According to this BLS data, I spend about 15% of my income on food. That includes both groceries and eating out. That's $313 a month for food. Unfortunately, in most lower income areas in this country, there aren't a ton of grocery stores, and the ones that are available are much less likely to carry fresh produce or other nutritious food. So I'm gonna see what I can do by stocking up on beans and rice, peanut butter and jelly, Wonder Bread, Top Ramen, freezer meals. For fresh options, I'll be looking at potatoes and some of the cheaper produce, and no eating out, or rarely, occasionally, on special occasions, eating out. Okay, but wait, don't I get government assistance for food, like food stamps? So from my research, I can see that to get government assistance, I need my savings account to be less than $2,000. Check. My income needs to be lower than $19,578. And I make $25,000, so nope. So we've covered our basic needs of housing, food, and transportation, but I still have a lot of expenses. We hear a lot about healthcare being a massive personal cost in the US, but what does that actually look like? Georgia's Medicaid website says that I qualify for government help, but even with that, I will be paying around 10% of my income on health-related expenses like medicine, doctor visits, getting care that isn't covered by this government insurance. This is one of the reasons why people in my income bracket live around 7 years less than the richest Americans. After all these main expenses, I'm left with a small amount of money for everything else. And there's a lot more that I need to spend just to live. Laundry, internet connection, cell phone. Conservatively, that adds up to $105, not taking into account the overcharges and hidden fees. Like, you're starting to see what's happening here. This doesn't add up. Entertainment, fitness, and travel just isn't feasible. I have no emergency savings, no rainy day fund, and live in stress of an unexpected car repair, a health emergency. Any of these unexpected charges could be a major setback. I'm probably gonna have to join the huge number of Americans that rely on debt to get through the month, whether that's credit card debt or short-term loans with high interest rates. Maybe I'll need to move back in with my parents or take on a second job. But what's clear is that my full-time job, which pays much more than the minimum wage, is still not enough to make it through the month.
Now let's see what we can do with $40,000 a year.
Now my name is Simon. I am the representative of the median American income of a single earner. I make $40,000 a year as an event coordinator at a country club in Atlanta. My $40,000 salary gives me just over $3,000 a month. After federal and state taxes, I'm left with just under $2,700. Using that same data set, my budget for housing is $1,133. I'm kind of feeling this one-bedroom house. Let's say between rent for this house and my utilities, I'm paying $1,133 for my monthly housing expenses. The country club is kind of far from my house, and because there's no public transportation, I'm gonna need a car. I saved up and purchased this 2011 Subaru Forester on Facebook Marketplace. I got it for $4,500. So like George, I spend about $136 a month just on gas to get to my job. This leaves me with a little over $400 for everything else. What am I gonna do for food? According to the BLS data, someone like me spends around $467 a month on food. I typically spend about $100 a week on groceries and can use the rest on a dinner out or two. I've got a Kroger grocery store 4 minutes away from my house. I'm using coupons, trying to get the best deal, but I have leeway to spend a little bit more on maybe a decent cut of meat or some fresh produce. Maybe I buy organic every once in a while. I can comfortably feed myself if I'm smart about how I spend and I don't eat out too much. This income level is right on the threshold where employers start to sponsor your healthcare plan. They start to subsidize it. That's a thing here in America. And luckily, my employer does. But even still, I spend $300 a month on health, medicine, out-of-pocket doctors, pre-deductible expenses, and now I get to pay for a gym. I signed up for this low-cost gym for $10 a month. So after covering these basic needs, I have $231 left for everything else, all of my other essentials. Laundry, cell phone, internet brings me down to $126. I will try to put some of this away for an emergency or a trip, put it into a savings account with a good interest rate. But to be honest, I'm probably gonna spend this on entertainment. Like, I wanna go out and have fun. I wanna go to a movie. I wanna subscribe to Hulu and Netflix. I might buy a book, might go out with some friends. And after all of that, I end up around zero. So all in all, I'm doing better than George, but not that much better. I've got some money left over at the end of the month, but an emergency expense would still leave me in debt.
All right, let's up this to 100 grand a year and see what our budget looks like. Okay, now I'm Tim, and I just found this job in sales. It makes me $100,000 a year.
I make 4 times more than George and double the median income that Simon makes. I'm now near the top 10% of earners in this country. My salary gives me $8,333 every month. $2,200 of that is gonna go to taxes, and I'm left with just over 6 grand.
In this income bracket, you see that people spend around 30% of their income on housing.
Until recently, this salary would have been more than enough to buy a house, but these days, not so much. But for the case of our assumption, let's assume that I, Tim, have been saving for 10 years and I'm finally ready to purchase my first home.
Zillow is telling me that I can afford a house that's around $314,000. Okay, I found one. It's a 1-bedroom condo. It's got a fireplace, access to a pool and a fitness room. It's in a pretty good location, and it's just under $260,000. With the condo fee, I'll be paying around $2,700 per month, which is about 32% of my income for housing.
I get to spend more on housing than George and Simon make in a month.
Oh, and by the way, I will have to cough up $20,000, which is my whole savings, for a 5% down payment and closing costs to make this house purchase.
Thanks to my good credit, I can qualify for a good car loan that allows me to buy a $50,000 BMW. It'll cost me $754 a month for 5 years, and it will leave me with $579 every month to spend on gas, repairs, and insurance. I'm even starting to be able to afford to bring it to a professional car wash place, get it detailed every couple months. I am upper middle class now, so I only have to pay 11% of my income on food per month just to feed myself. I get to eat out a lot more lately. I can buy nice meat and nice produce. I'm not overly concerned about the prices. And lately, since meal delivery apps have become more common, I'm ordering DoorDash like once or twice a week. My job pays for a lot of my health insurance, and yet I still pay $500 a month on health. I'm able to save money at this point so that a minor medical emergency isn't a huge deal. But the doctors I do go to have to be covered by my insurance plan. With all my big expenses covered, I still have $665 to cover Wi-Fi, unlimited data on my phone, and since laundry and a gym are in my apartment, I actually don't need to use much cash for that. So even after all of these essentials, I have money to save and invest. And even still, I have cash left over to go out with friends. Every few months, I'm able to save up enough to go on vacation. My work pays me even when I'm taking time off, so I don't need to worry about that. I do have to strategically choose my travel locations to make sure that they're affordable. Not bad, and in fact, much better than the vast majority of Americans.
All right, now let's up this to $1 million a year and see what our budget starts to look like.
My name is Noah. I am a junior managing director at a big private equity fund. I'm in finance. I work 70 hours a week and I am earning $1 million a year. That is $83,000 a month. After taxes, it's more like $48,000 a month. In 1 month, I'm making double what George makes in an entire year. In 3 years, I'll make more than he makes in an entire lifetime. Like, I'm officially among the top 1% of income earners in this country. And I'm very lucky because my income and wealth are increasing at a faster rate than everyone else's. And we'll see why in just a second. Making this much money, I can get a really nice house by spending 28% of my income, which means I can afford around a $2.6 million house. Wow, this one's kind of nice. Look at this kitchen. Oh, and this beautiful yard out here. I might pick up croquet. This house is going to cost me around $19,000 every month for the mortgage and other expenses, like house cleaners that come once a week to clean my entire house. I'm spending 16% of my income on transportation, a little over $13,000 a month on everything cars and planes. Instead of owning a car, I lease one in 3-year periods so that I can always be driving the newest, fanciest car. It's gonna cost me about $1,000 a month all in. I'm also taking a lot of taxis lately because I can afford it, and I can afford a private driver here and there. I can hop on a flight too whenever I want. And when I fly internationally, I even splurge on business class. Still pretty expensive, but I've got all of these airline miles that I've racked up from all of my work travel that I actually get upgraded for free often. So let's talk about food. Based on the BLS data, I could technically afford to spend $8,000 on food every month. But I'm not sure that's totally common among this income bracket. So I estimate that somebody in this bracket is spending more like $3,500 per month on food, which is still a lot. I'm officially deep in the don't look at food prices, don't shop for my own groceries, don't worry about ordering takeout whenever I want kind of rich. Now, I can't afford a private chef yet, but I have opted for a high-end meal service that delivers dinners to my house. I have to work a lot. The difference is that per hour, my hours are much more financially valuable. George, Simon, and Tim all had to spend a lot of their hours cooking and cleaning and traveling around, but I can just pay to get a lot of that time back. I could technically afford to spend $4,000 a month on health, but again, we estimate that it's a little bit lower, more like $2,500, which would still mean a totally different healthcare world. I can go to any doctor, I can pay for a therapist out of pocket, I can easily afford to see a specialist for any kind of preventative care, even stuff that isn't covered by my very good insurance. I can pay for it. I can pay out of pocket. And this is one reason why my life expectancy is way up here. I'm probably gonna live 7 or 8 years longer than George. Laundry, cell phone bills, Wi-Fi, these are all negligible costs for me. I'm left with at least $10,000, and it could be way more if I reduced some of these assumptions. So what do I do with all this leftover money? My money is in the stock market. 24/7, growing, compounding into more and more wealth.
All right, now let's see what happens when we turn this into $25 million a year, which is an amount of money that some people in this country actually make every year.
My name is Robert. You'll never hear about me because I am the owner of a highly successful national car wash chain. Or maybe I'm the CEO of Zillow or Chevron. Or maybe I'm a pretty famous celebrity and I make $25 million a year. Noah was already in the top 1% of income earners, but now I am truly in the ranks of the global elite. At this point, we have to start to rethink money because people at this income bracket think less about their yearly salary and more about the total value of all of the stuff they own, their net worth. Most of my pay is in stocks, not cash. I spend money knowing that I have all of these assets that I could sell if needed, even if it doesn't come to me in a paycheck every month. Which is actually really great because I'm not taxed on this stuff unless I sell it for cash. And even then, I'm taxed at like 15 to 20%, which means that in a lot of years, my tax rate will be less than Tim, who makes $100,000. I'm paying less of my income in taxes than he is. So let's see what I can buy. Now, given my gargantuan income, I could technically afford this house, but because I'm planning to buy my summer house in Italy this year, I'm gonna go with something a little bit more modest like this one. What you'll start to see with this house and everything else in this income bracket is how it allows me to physically isolate myself from the concerns that most people have. I don't have to think about crime, homelessness, noise, pollution. I can live surrounded only by people who are wealthy like me. Getting around is really easy for me. I've got a couple of cars. I rotate driving them every once in a while. Oh, and did I mention I have a full-time driver? I pay him $51,000 a year. I'm spending 2 times what George makes in a year to pay for this, and it's totally worth it because it saves me time. When I travel, he drives me right onto the runway, where I jump into a private jet. Now, I don't own this jet yet, but I do charter private flights. It cost me about $27,000 for this 2-hour flight. I can easily do that. 27 grand feels to me what $43 feels like to Simon. I'll pay that for a nice private jet. Do I cook? No, I do not cook. I enter grocery stores only when I feel like it would be fun to feel like a regular person for a moment. And yet, magically, when I open my refrigerator, everything I need is in there. Designed by my nutritionist, purchased by my house manager, prepared by my personal chef. And yes, you can see I have a whole staff of people who help me manage my life. I'm sure all of this costs a lot of money, but honestly, I've never even thought about it. Okay, this is insane. And while these costs are very feasible for someone who makes $25 million, not everyone who earns this much money lives like this. In fact, a lot of super rich people are incredibly frugal, making their high earnings that much more impactful because they can get rich much faster. But what we see with Robert is that you actually could spend this much money on food and housing given your income, and many do. So in addition to my nutritionist and chef, I have a personal trainer and health coach who comes to my house every day and guides me through my workout. I have a private doctor who is on call, who comes to my house. I pay her 20 grand a year just to be on call. She's available, and she'll come do whatever I need, like a quick steroid shot to my bum knee before I play a game of tennis. My healthcare is mostly preventative. I get all the scans and tests and routines done to ensure that I'm in tip-top shape. I can afford any surgery or healthcare routine or procedure that I want. And last year, I fully replaced all of my front teeth with veneers. It only cost me $28,000. And remember, $28,000 for me is what it feels like when Tim spends $112, or what George feels like spending $28. Not nothing, but not a huge deal. Even after spending on all of this, I still have lots of money that my financial manager funnels into sophisticated investment portfolios. I'll just take 30 grand here and there to buy collector's items that I'm into. This stuff is fun, but it also contributes to my net worth because all of this retains and grows in value. And my clever accountant has recently mentioned that he found a way to occasionally sell this stuff and get a nice tax break on the profits. Now listen, I make a meaningful difference in my community with philanthropy. Like, I'm donating $500,000 to my family foundation, which is promoting education in the city. Funneling money and assets into this foundation allows me to get some really nice tax breaks, helps me avoid capital gains tax, and it gives me a buzz of feeling like I'm a generous millionaire. I even donated a few $100,000 to my nephew's private school last year. And even after all of this, I've got tons of leftover income. I'm easily able to cover the mortgage on my secondary property in Lake Como. And yes, there are echelons above me that someday maybe I'll reach, but I'm still existing on a fully different plane than most every single person in the world. Almost every stressor that you can think of, I can pay away. And the ones that I can't pay away, like heartbreak, grief, and social anxiety, I won't be able to pay that away at any level of wealth. I am protected financially from just about any emergency that could occur in my life. And so long as I manage my finances responsibly, I will never experience life below this level of wealth. The difference between these levels of income is kind of hard to fathom. If you're in the $25 million camp, you make more in 1 hour than George makes in 6 months. In just one 8-hour workday, you're making more than George makes in 4 years. 100 years ago, The divide between the rich and the poor was incredibly stark in this country. The top 1% would bring home 20% of all of the income. But then look what happened. We kind of fixed it. We taxed the super rich. The working class organized and rose up, fighting for fair pay. And by the 1980s, it was more like 10% of the income went to the top 1%. But watch what happens next. We're going back up, and we're leaving people like George in a trap. It's not hard to see why someone like George would have lost faith in our government and our institutions, and the concept of an American dream. The system is not working for George. Each cost leads to another cost, creating a poverty trap with no chance of getting out. How is George supposed to have the time, the money, or even the brain space to think about school or improving his skills? His social mobility is limited. We often think about America as this land of opportunity. If you work hard, you can move up. But the data shows us that that just isn't the case anymore. For someone like George, or for the tens of millions of Americans like him, the gap is getting wider, and it's getting harder to close. And that's bad. Not just bad because it's unfair, but it's bad for our economy. It's bad for our politics. And it's bad for the 44 million people who live in the richest country in the world, but don't have enough food every day. The people who only have access to credit via predatory lenders. The people whose lives are rocked when they get a $25 overdraft fee, or who can't afford an oil change. It's time for the people in charge in this country to do what they did 100 years ago and reverse this curve before it becomes too late.